Hi there! This video is going to be an introduction to isometric drawing, and maybe by the end of it you will feel confident enough to start drawing forms that are a little bit more complex, like something like this little message, be kind. So the basic premise is you're looking at an object where the front corner is, or a corner is closest to the viewer, and each surface, vertical surface, goes away at a 30-degree angle. So you can kind of see here the angle that this surface and this surface is even or symmetrical, and we use a angle, so we have a vertical edge, and the angle at which these surfaces go away from the viewer is at 30 degrees in both directions. Okay, so if you look at the word isometric itself, this means measurement, and this Latin word here or term is iso, means even. Think of isosceles triangle, which has even angles. Isometric, equal. So we actually end up, if you draw a cube, you end up seeing each surface evenly. There is 120 degrees between each of these surfaces, or within each surface, so you see them equally. So isometric, equal view of an object, a fantastic drawing method for product design especially. So let's get started. To get started on a cube, I draw a vertical line and then a horizontal, because each 90-degree corner needs to be divided so that I have a 30-degree angle, essentially marking out an arrow pointing down. One technique is you could divide a piece of paper into thirds that sets out your 30 degrees. 90 divided by 3 equals 30, to mark out your 3 axes for your cube. Can you see that little trick? Using a piece of paper is super helpful to avoid using a ruler for freehand sketching. It kind of removes that tool away from the table. Drawing in light lines allows you to fix things up before you confirm the form with some darker lines. Next, I want to show you some common mistakes that are often made as we're sketching out in 3D. Drawing continuous lines is often the way we draw. So this V here is very natural to do, but it doesn't allow you to check whether your angles have been set out evenly. Setting out a Y with 3 separate lines is an awesome way to start. This gives you a chance to check your other edges against that guide or set angles from the beginning. The base lines of your form really need to match that, and you can see that those two are far too horizontal. Drawing out your left or right panel first rather than that front corner could lead you wayward, and that back edge is those back edges are far too high and not parallel. So I recommend starting with either a Y or an arrow like drawn out here that allows me to check my angles and my axes are correct, and then I slowly work my way around drawing out parallel lines, and actually even just about ghosting that first angle to draw out the next. And you can see that we essentially have 3 sets of parallel lines across the drawing. For a cube, we'll be drawing more complex forms later on. My pencil can also be a tool like my paper earlier on. Shifting that across the page at the same angle helps me to kind of understand the angle that I'm trying to repeat for the different edges of the form, and I'm using the shadow as my guide to trace. I'm not using the actual edge of the pencil like a ruler. And again, those dark lines just allow me to confirm my form afterwards. So from those comments, I am going to fix up my 3 cubes, being aware of the 3 sets of parallel lines, and I'm showing you how you can move your page. It's far more disorientating for you to follow, but you'll notice that I am best drawing lines that are perpendicular to my shoulders, or drawing vertical lines that kind of go towards my body. So I'm turning my paper so that I can draw that type of line, and it also allows me to check my 3 sets of lines are parallel to one another. That dark line allows me to confirm the form afterwards, and you can see those incorrect edges kind of fade away. So 3 sets of parallel lines, it's your thing to focus on as you first draw out some cubes or cuboid, rectangular prism type forms. Parallel lines is your guide. Get your Y or your arrow facing down first and repeat from there. Here I am just going to draw out a series of 3D forms in isometric, and you'll see the habits and techniques that I've talked about in my previous demos kind of utilized within these different constructions. So light lines, setting out my Y, checking my edges are parallel before darkening in. That little orange triangle helps me kind of establish my angles, which is really helpful. And you'll notice with a triangular prism, as we start to get forms that don't fit within a full rectangular prism, is that I still need that guide there. That square set out where that middle point and the top point of my triangular prism was before I was able to do those extension lines and repeat that angle of the triangle across. Please take note, as I'm not using the piece of paper as my ruler. I'm not drawing against it because I want to establish and build up my control of my hand while drawing. So I'm pretty confident with extending those corners out, but I'm not sure about the angle of the trapezoid. So let's take note of that angle being extended out from each of the corners, and that parallel line drawn out a couple of times as my guide, because that angle isn't something that I've drawn multiple times prior. It's a new angle within the form. As we outline things, is our chance to double check as I'm drawing. It does look very fast, of course it's sped up. The approach I take to drawing a circle in isometric starts with considering that a square turns into a diamond in isometric. So I always will start with setting out that diamond surface in isometric, whichever surface it is. I'm going to do all 3, and you kind of can predict that a circle is then going to be squashed into an oval or an ellipse. So the key lines that I need are the quarters, so those horizontals and verticals, as well as the diagonals. Those diagonals set out the major and minor axis of an ellipse. Along those minor and major axes, or the diagonals, I divide into thirds and identify where the circle or ellipse is going to touch the square. Like in the 2D version, the circle touches the square, my ellipse is going to touch the diamond of the surface. So same process on a top surface, and there are those major axes set in going in different directions. So the long side, the major axis of an ellipse, is set out across the different surfaces of an isometric cube in different directions, right? Heading off to the left, to the right, or set horizontal. So divide those diagonals into thirds and identify where the ellipse touches the square or our diamond surface. So thirds again, exactly the same process, because remember, each surface, whether vertical left, vertical right, or horizontal, is the same shape. In 3D isometric, that is how you draw circles. This last part of the tutorial is to demonstrate drawing out a combination of these simple geometric forms that can build up to communicating a message, being product design, etc. So for this, I am just communicating a little message to you through a combination of different forms together, and you'll see this process here as I started with a cube and I'm building vertically the elements and figuring out that I want to have a cylinder that sits in the middle or separates the two cubes from one another, using that major axis to set out the width of it, and then once I am happy with the form, starting to outline it and make it nice and bold on the page. But at the beginning, the key thing is to start with really light lines, establish the overall proportions of your form and those key axes, your vertical and your two sets of 30-degree axes, and then from there you can start to kind of carve out your proportions of the different elements within that, because you've got the guides of your construction lines of the crate. So here I also am going to be using rectangular prisms, kind of like a cube, but in sense, and then also adding in another cylinder that separates the two, and yeah, it's line weight as well, but being consistent, working your way and starting to build up those, add those little tricks in to help you, okay? So note that I've just used that pencil to check in that tangent as to where that edge, that final edge of the cylinder is. So hopefully you can see that that's a high, and now I'm going to work through drawing out another series of letters that are mostly blocky. They have really consistent proportions, and they will build their way up with light construction lines, sticking to the rules of isometric of vertical and two sets of 30-degree lines. Those construction lines are really helpful for me to make changes as I draw. Those adjustments allow for just some creativity often, and yeah, at the end of this video you'll kind of see that the combination of that will have a lot of impact, because I've kind of allowed myself to build as I go, rather than kind of setting out something and not allowing me to change those rules. So I kind of set some rules, I kind of work with them, but they're not set in stone until the very end when I've had the chance to check. So there you have it. There is your introduction to isometric drawing. Use the rules, practice heaps, all the best with trying it out yourself, and rewind the video, go back to things, techniques that I've done, and enjoy.